All right. And welcome everyone once again. And Mr. Walston, will you be making the presentation or will this be coming
I
from
will,
John?
sir. I will. And I just want to share with the committee what I am sharing is a 51-page quick overview of the story to make sure I don't want to take up every minute of our time. So I'll go through it very quickly and ask if we can hold the questions to the end. I think you're going to find the majority of the slides you've already seen, and then leave time for the end just to kind of for any clarifying questions you might have. And so what I'm about to share, again, there are 51 pages in the book. Mike and John, do you remember how many pages of the entire book when it's being completed book?
I don't, because
Mike?
we're thinking appendix 2. And
Yeah, I think it's gonna be about 175 when it's all bundled up
Okay.
together.
Okay. And Grace just put something in the chat. All right. And so, again, there are 51 slides in this. I will go to them rather quickly. And there are a couple of slides in which we've made some additions, and I'll make sure to stop to talk about those. And so our table of contents, in which we will have pages on the side here for the book. And certainly you've seen the great pictures of everyone, cabinet member slide, the overall proposed budget of 150 million. These pictures we've updated with our kids in Danbury Public Schools. So all of the pictures you will see is Danbury Public Schools. So the 6.4% budget request, 9 million, and the total of $150 million. And our vision and mission statement, equity statement, and the 2 slides side-by-side portrait of the graduate. You saw this, it was a little bit different layout before. Our book will read from left to right. So as you see this portrait of the graduate, and then the 3 descriptors, and then you'll see the next 2 on the other side. Our strategic plan, and this is kind of year 1 of this implementation. There were 6 pillars of the plan, and you can see them here. And then the overview, just talking about our demographics. And here's our profile. And of course, this is as of the date we made the book, 12,200 students, 13 elementary, 3 middle, 1 high school. And here's our enrollment. And then here's a breakdown of who those students are. And this is a picture of Danbury High School's cafeteria for folks to get a feeling of what it's like to walk in that building during cafeteria time. The unfunded mandates, we spoke to this one before, but it's mentioned here intentionally, the right to read legislation, which is certainly monies. If we did not have to implement this legislation, we could be using these monies on staffing right now. If we did not have to go from 21 credits to 25 credits, there's 25 additional teachers we would not have to hire right now. But these are mandates that we have to implement. And so I just wanted to also share that reality because it's certainly having an impact on our general fund budget. COVID and social emotional impact. And so we've hired quite a bit of staff members, whether it's deans, whether it's social workers, guidance counselors during the pandemic. The wheel that you see to the left is the adoption of our social emotional platform that we look to implement here in the district. But we've continued, and I know I've talked to the board about chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is at any point when kids are missing school. So that includes suspensions, that includes attendance. And we are finding, our chronic absenteeism number is close to 24%, which is up from about 7% pre-pandemic. I'm sorry, it was around 7% pre-pandemic. So our challenges have just been multiplied by 3 or 4, almost 4 post-pandemic now. And here's that chronic absenteeism number. And a little definition of the chronic absenteeism. And certainly the board feels the impact of this in our expulsion hearings. The expulsions really is just a slice of what the real issue is around suspensions. And then those kids are missing instructional time, which plays a role in chronic absenteeism for us. And so this is our teacher of the year from last year. And we had this in here prior to our ask, as she speaks to making sure we resource teachers to help meet the needs of kids as part of her speech. And we thought it would be a nice touch to also showcase her. And our budget drivers. And of course, the wonderful day that we had with our teachers of the year all the way across. And I think the committee will recall this slide as our budget drivers. We did change that back to budget drivers instead of program needs. And so the big one, of course, is the salaries and benefits, contractual obligations. I know everyone on this call has heard this already. And then, of course, the other big one is the 2.6 million in enrollment increases. And then here's the breakdown, the 5 million for salaries, 2.6 for enrollment. I know John and Mike have walked the committee and the board through energy increases, technology, but this ESSER 2 shortfall, John, can you just quickly talk about that shortfall number?
I can. So if you remember, we chronicled it a little bit in one of the answers to board questions. I think that came up the first time the finance committee met. It's primarily teachers at Danbury High School that we want to move over into the general fund. And you heard Principal Donovan talk about how important that was. If you recall, when he spoke about asking for several years for more teachers and finally getting them, these were the teachers he was talking about. We were able to provide them with the ESSER grant.
Right. Thanks, John. And then the salaries benefits breakdown. And so you may recall from John's previous presentation, the 79.7 million this year is 83.4 million next year. So the same staffing for this year is a 4.6 increase just based on contractual obligations. The same is also true of benefits, 4.4% increase. In total, we're talking $5 million between this year's budget and next year's budget for the same staffing. And here's the enrollment growth we've been talking about, and this is a table. You'll see the bigger numbers are found in the 6 through 12 lines. And so year to date, 27, a little over 27 and a half for middle school, where it goes up to 2,800, 28 plus 100 and 2324. The high school, you'll see close to a little over, close to 3,700 right now, 3,750 projected next year, over 3,800 and 2425, and kind of flatlining at 3,800, 3,850 and 2526 when the new building is expected to open. And again, the committee might recall this slide where it's, so the actual number is the 11,843. So that's in the gray, 12,110. And then our projected, meaning the projected from the demographer, was 12,189. But by October, but the adjusted for January 1 was actually 12,289. And so then from there, we did a plus 100 projection for 24, 25, and 25, 26. And so you'll see our anticipated growth over the next couple of years going from 12,200 right now. We're anticipating at least 200 more students by 25, 26. And again, that's starting from here and then looking at the number that is up here. Multilingual learners, we have the highest percentage of multilingual learners in the state of Connecticut, the highest in the state of Connecticut. And that growth is like no other district in the state of Connecticut. And so you'll see where we are, where we've been with in 1920 at the start of the pandemic, 3,331. Projected by next year, you can see we're over 1,000 students just in this one category of 4,415. Currently, we are at a 65-to-1 ratio. An optimal staff-student ratio is 45-to-1. And our numbers are growing. We have 1,000 additional students. So to get to 45-1 would be a challenge. To maintain a 65-to-1 is really our request is trying to do is just maintain that number. 45-to-1 again is the optimal ratio. Students with disabilities, growth nonetheless, certainly not as significant as our multilanguage learners, but you'll see where we are now, 22-23, with an expected 30 plus additional special ed students next year. And that is including pre-K. And so last year, we were not able to get all of the staff for Danbury High School. That is not a new trend here in Danbury, but it does come at a cost. It comes at a cost when trying to retain staff. It comes at a cost when you hear that our staff is coming in and saying that they're overworked. But just to give you an idea of what that looks like. And then there's also a financial reality as well. And so understaffing currently requires teachers to teach 57 classes outside of their contractual obligations. And this is just at the high school. And so everyone on this call may typically have 5 classes. The majority of our teachers at the high school teach 5 classes. But because we are understaffed at the school, we may call upon teachers to teach a 6th class. That's the equivalent of 5.5 additional teachers, or this number, $415,000. And then we broke down the enrollment increases in terms of our requests. So you can you've had the background or the backup, if you will, why we need the ESL and bilingual staff, and that's why we have 8 FTEs here. The special ed staffing, 8 FTEs, most of those being needed in pre-K. 3 additional staff for middle school, the 13.5 for the high school to address the growth at that level. You might recall Principal Donovan coming in and speaking to the board in the cabinet that evening. And then, of course, the Save the Advocates. I know this has been well chronicled. We had talked about 1 additional one at each middle school to reflect the request from the board last year, and then 2 additional at the high school to reflect the ongoing growth at that school. And that's how we got to the 2.6 million. And then this is the enrollment increases by staffing area. And so just breaking it down a little bit more, 1 bilingual staff would be needed at Pembroke, 1 at Broadview to address the bilingual growth there. The same is true so there's a bilingual Portuguese, but then there's also a bilingual Spanish needed. And so that's why those 2 positions are being requested. At the same time, a heritage Spanish teacher is needed at Rogers Park. And then we have a Portuguese and Spanish full-time non-teaching classroom support. And that's 4 staff members, and that means paraprofessional support. And then on the special education side, we have the preschool teacher here at the top, the 5 special ed teachers across the district, and then 2, 1 physical therapist, and then 1 speech and language person to get to the 8. And then to round out the requests, we have the 3 middle schools staffing that are needed at the middle schools to address the growth there. The high school, the 0.5, we can talk about this later if you like. I know there were some questions at the board meeting as well. I know that Casimiro was on the call. She could speak to this. The 0.5 that is needed in the spring, going into the following year. Core class instruction, 6 FTEs for the high school, 3 full-time counselors to line us up. It's also lined us up perfectly for the launch of the academy, and then 4 elective class teachers. This gets us to the 13.5 FTEs. And then you'll see the advocates broken out, 1 for each middle school and then 2 for the high school. Energy and utilities. John walked us through this, I think a couple of times now, certainly in finance, but also with the regular board meeting, anticipating some significant increases in heating and natural gas, 30% and 44% respectively, including electricity and propane, astronomical gains and projections in those areas. And then we have the gasoline. John, can you just reiterate one more time how we landed on these numbers and just kind of the rationale behind the projections.
Yeah, well, each one really is different, although they they look like they might move similarly when we put them all together as energies and utilities. But they are very much the market forces that drive each one are very different from not only just supply and demand, but in some cases, international events affect what happens, particularly with the price per barrel of oil. And you're hearing a lot lately about natural gas. So we're seeing big increases there. Electricity has been well publicized in the news with Eversource. It hits us just like everywhere else. And propane was, we had been uh, taking advantage, if I can, of a lock-in in price that Chick Volpe, the city purchasing director, had put in place that lasted 2 or 3 years. It was a long time. It expired in June, and the prices are much higher since then. So each one looked at individually and uh, together, and you see the results here.
Thank you. Thanks, John. The technology replacement cycle, I know we had presented out on this. And given that we are losing the grants, we were doing well with the grants to get us kind of to be able to launch our one-to-one for our district was great. We certainly had enough grant support to get that going, but now to maintain it, we are projecting a $1 million cost to make that happen. And you will see the Chromebooks and licenses I'm sorry, Mike, can you explain this, the 2,500 a year for 5 years, that cycle?
Sure. Right. So currently we're anticipating about needing 12,500 Chromebooks. That's accounts for our total enrollment plus a number for droppage, breakage, spilling things on them, so on and so forth. So 12,500 books to be replaced over 5 years. That's 2,500 a year. So every year we'll take the oldest 2,500, take them out of circulation and put in a new 2,500. And then every 5 years, the entire load will turn over.
Okay. And can you walk the committee through the copier replacement and where we are now? And
Yep. So copier, yeah, very similar logic. Copiers are a little bit more robust. Obviously, they just plug into the wall. Kids aren't carrying them around and sticking them in bags and stuff. So, and they're a little bit more mechanical. And they also don't have a lot of the safety and security issues that we have with the Chromebooks. So the Chromebooks, for example, if they're not able to run the latest operating system, then they won't get a security update, which could leave, a child exposed. So the copier replacement every 6 years. Currently, we have, I think, 112 copiers throughout the district. We're adding a few more in to account for the Career Academy. So we're expecting that to be 120 copiers total. So that's 20 a year over 6 years.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And equipment and services is just a breakdown. We'll have some subsequent pages. We'll kind of break down what this means for transportation, et cetera. And so transportation, I know John had here, but it's really the cost of having a district in place. And so for our public school buses, we're talking about a 7.2% increase from this year to next year. Our non-pubs, we are responsible for their transportation as well. We have a 3.5% increase there. And then our special education busing transportation. And this is really reflective of not only the enrollment growth, but IEP needs as well. And we're looking at a 10.7% increase there. And buildings and maintenance improvements. A lot of these improvements are a result of enrollment growth. And so you'll see room dividers. You'll see things like meteor center pit fill in. And so this classroom partitions are addressing growth at our schools to make sure they have more realistic spaces for classroom instruction. And then there are some other things just for general maintenance, new auto scrubbers to make sure, quite frankly, it's a worthwhile investment because without the auto scrubbers in the buildings, it just means folks have to work more and work more overtime. So it's a wise investment, quite frankly. New flooring in some of our schools, you'll see that for KSI and KSP, et cetera. Cost saving strategies, and we had talked about initially our request was 13.4 million, and we wanted to make sure we can find every efficiency possible to pull that number back. And this next slide helps to walk us through that. And so an opportunity to renegotiate some of our service contracts, possibly prepay some service contracts, i.e. transportation, pre-purchase goods and services with remaining 2023 funds. And so this could be anything. And I think we talked to we talked to the board about this already. With approval from the board, we can switch some accounts to pay some things early, hopefully at a savings. And so we will be reaching out to those companies and those service providers. And then last but not least, an opportunity to utilize one-time reserve to close that remaining gap. So one-time meaning whether that's if we have something that needs to be paid down this year, but is not reoccurring for next year, we'll use the reserves for that. We'll look to go to the reserves to pay down on those things. Looking ahead at the Career Academy, of course, I got a request to update my computer. Do that tomorrow. Looking ahead, Danbury Career Academy. And so year one, the estimated costs, we would need 55 teachers to work with our high school students at the Carter site. For the middle school, for 365 middle school students, we would need 59 FTEs. This is not all teachers, but this is a combination of teachers, certified and non-certified staff at 5.4 million. And then transportation costs for an additional 27 new buses brings us to the 12.5 million that you've been hearing about. And then the fiscal reality, and let me make this a little bigger. And this is really just summarizing some of the things that we've already mentioned. And that is enrollment gains consist of increased numbers in special education and with our multi-language learners here. Staffing costs have increased as a result of negotiations for our staff, which frankly is all regionally competitive. Another budget driver certainly is our shift to one-to-one devices, and this has to continue to be maintained now as we move forward. Inflation, John has already talked about when talking about utilities and energy costs. And then the big one, of course, that we're all aware of, and that is the 12.5 million it's going to cost to open up this new building for high school and middle school students in 25-26. So the cliff, which we have certainly talked about a number of different ways with the board and with the city. Let me reduce this now if I can. There we go. Okay. And so if we can look at the left-hand side, ESSER 3, ESSER 2, CARES Act, we refer to CARES Act as ESSER 1 oftentimes. Alliance is our big grant that we rely on for staffing and support staff in our schools. Title I, we use similarly. Our IDEA grant is a grant for our students with disabilities. And then other grant revenue, that's kind of pulling together the remaining grants. And then the city funding is, of course, from the city of Danbury. And so I just want to walk you through this going from left to right. And so ESSER 3, of course, and really the point we want to make is ESSER 3, we received the sizable grant from ESSER 3, which was supposed to provide support for kids, mostly for acceleration and for social emotional support. ESSER 2, similarly, but also for when we received ESSER 2, we had received kind of instructions, similarly, not only for acceleration, but also to address any COVID strategies that we need, mitigation strategies. And so, we purchased over $500,000 worth of furniture to address, as a mitigation strategy to spread kids out. We hired additional teachers to make sure we went from a 7-period schedule to an 8-period schedule to make sure we can spread as many kids out at Danbury High School as possible. However, at the same time, while we were implementing those mitigating strategies, we were also dealing with increased enrollment growth. And so that enrollment growth, quite frankly, is that lifeboat analogy that we talked about with the board in previous presentations, where we had a lifeboat in these ESSER 2, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3 served its purpose in that regard, but that wasn't its initial purpose. For us, it helped to make sure that we can continue to meet the needs of our growing population. But those funds are expiring. And so you'll see in 22-23, the CARES Act is no longer around. You'll see in 23-24, ESSER 2 expires this summer. Actually, it expires in September of 2023. And then you will see in 24-25, all 3 relief grants will have expired, and we will be left with making some really tough decisions because unlike some of our other districts that did not have enrollment growth, it's a little easier to lose those positions. We did experience enrollment growth. We did not get the funding to support that enrollment growth. And now that growth is previously funded by these 3 big grants is now gone. And so Alliance, you will see the projected growth in Alliance going from left to right, currently at $19.9 million. Next year, anticipating close to 22 million. 24-25 projected 24 million. 25-26 are projected almost 26 million. And so as we share those numbers, and certainly it's the same of title, we certainly continue to expect increases, but it's not meeting the respected need. And so you'll see at the bottom, I'm going to bring your attention to where it says city funding. And so city funding right now is at 141 million, and this is our budget. Our need is 223 million to help address all of our needs across the district. That would mean in 23-24, we would need 150 million as we've asked. If you go to 24-25, now with those expiring funds leaving us, our ask now jumps from 150 million to a projected 172 million next year. Again, without those relief monies, we see our need going from 172 million. And now, by the way, this is the time when the academy comes in, that now number is jumping up to $187 million budget with the city. And so I can tell you last year when I made my presentations, and we were kind of making our presentations across the city, we imploring the city to make an investment because we knew this day was coming. And frankly, didn't think it would be realistic that we can get $172 million budget and $187 million budget. But without a significant investment in the city, in the school budget, we're pushing ourselves in the corner where we need something this sizable. So this is what we're facing right now in 24-25. We've used the term kicking the can down the road. And so literally you'll see the $11.4 million in 23-24. We have one more school year left. In 24-25 and 25-26, we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. And so trying to find out where those monies are coming from is something we're all going to have to put our heads together to try to figure out. The Danbury Career Academy, I know we've talked about, and the staffing that's going to be needed to open up that building. I know we just had the groundbreaking yesterday. We have some pictures to memorialize that. But once again, we will need $12.5 million just to staff that building. That's the 25-26 school year. It's an estimated 10 to 15% increase we're going to need moving forward after that. And so the costs just continue to just compound. And without some type of sizable investment now, the challenges are just going to be insurmountable in 24-25 and 25-26. So I will end there. The subsequent pages, the pages that make up the next 100 slides, or Teresa and Al, are essentially your book. And Ms. Cooper, the book that you have at home, that hard copy blue book, we took that book and now that is in this presentation. It's all one big book. So nothing is separate. The story is in front of the line items, and then the line items come after this Q&A page that's here. We, of course, we will take the Q&A page out of the book when we go to submit it. So I will stop sharing now, and I'll be happy to jump back into any pages that you might have any questions on.
Teresa?
Will we be getting all this tomorrow?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Kara is going to update the packet. I think we have 24 hours to update the packet. So the blue book that the board received will be replaced with the book, THE book, the only book. That will be the same book that the city of Danbury receives, meaning the council, and it will be the same book that the board has. And I will make sure next year, assuming you will have me, make sure that the board receives a book in draft by the last meeting in January, probably a workshop. I think prematurely I handed you that book too early this year. And so I had a book in circulation in which we never typically hand the book out in circulation, knowing that we still have to make some modifications. But it was important to me that we had a book that told the story. So we didn't have slides here and a book here. It's all going to be one. And so I'm hoping it will engage our readers and engage our council collectively, so that they're pulling it all together as they go through the slides in the book and the presentation. But we will have. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Al. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Russo. I've talked enough.
We certainly thank you for your efforts and giving us the numbers to look at. And we've gone through them, and we do understand your needs. I see Louisa's hand up. Louisa Britton, are you on deck?
Thank you. Thanks, Al. Just a quick question, or a couple questions. The need that you have the number, the total number, which includes the 150 million ask from the city.
Mm-hmm.
Is that our number just to, keep our doors open and make sure that we reach all of our benchmarks that we need as far as staffing and all of that stuff? Or is there, a wish list that was also folded into that number?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Teresa, I'll answer you in this way, because I know this question is coming, so I appreciate the question. So I think it really depends on what the taxpayers in this city want for our children, right? And so my team, we put together a budget that reflects what we feel and know are the needs of our kids. And so if we are happy with our kids where they are right now, and that means high numbers of chronic absenteeism, low numbers of proficiency across the board, meaning kids not at grade level. If that means we're happy with kids growing at rates with, frankly, I think an upward trajectory, but I cannot tell you we're going to maintain that upward trajectory if we lose the resources that help support that trajectory. And so if we're happy with not having resources like they have in Stanford, like they have in Norwalk, like they have in other districts that look like ours, and I can't think of the one that starts with the M right now. Kara, what's Mark's? Meriden. These districts have coaches. These districts have people pressing on principals, who we call chiefs. These districts have people, folks, ESL teachers who can help support our multilanguage learners. Without those things, I can't even tell you we will continue to experience the success that we have right now, Louisa. And by the way, and again, I think the board has gotten a taste of what the differences in our schools post-pandemic, experiencing what's happening with our expulsions. It's a different school system right now. It's a different school system post-pandemic. And this budget doesn't even have all the guidance counselors and social workers that we need right now. And so that's my long way of saying this ask, what we have right now, is what we feel like we need. Now, if you tell me we're going to lose millions of dollars, we're not going to come close, then I'm telling you we're going to lose the support that this system needs to keep the upward trajectory that we've experienced.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I have one more question. That number that you're projecting once the academy opens, that 12 million, that's strictly staffing. That doesn't include operational numbers. Am I correct?
That is correct, Louisa.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so 12 million is just staffing. So we have no idea what it's actually going to cost to operate the buildings.
Right, like energy and utilities
Yeah.
costs, not even calculated in that number right now.
Oof.
Okay,
Teresa?
great. Thank you.
Thanks, Louisa.
From one of the last presentations, John mentioned taking the ESSER 2 funds to replace some of those copiers. So is this budget phase 2 of that proposed copier replacement?
John, you want to clarify that piece? Because I thought we said we were going to do something else with 2,
Yeah.
but the unfilled positions money from the general fund, we were going to try to address the copier piece.
Because of the need for the mandate for the reading program, we think it's better to use the remaining ESSER 2 money for the K-5 reading program. And as you saw, and as Dr. Seelig mentioned, we're going to start the copier replacement program. Year 1 will be actually this year with some of the unfilled positions. That's the one I mentioned would be coming back to you with the transfer for.
And,
Mr. Walson?
Yes, Mr.
In the beginning of your presentation, I had a little blip in my audio.
Okay.
Did I understand correctly? Are we bumping up to 3 chiefs of schools rather than 2, or is the number 2?
I'm sorry. So that's so funny because that came up in my office today. So it should say Chief of Schools Administration. And just to clarify, so John's position, Mike's position, and Kim Thompson's position, they're chiefs. So those are the 3 chiefs that's in the general budget. John is the chief of finance, Mike is chief of operations, Kim is chief of HR.
Not,
The chief,
whatchamacallit, yeah.
right, the
Mr.
2
Roach, Mr. Roach
and
and
Rocco, right.
Anna
Those,
Rocco.
right, those 2 were paid out of Title I.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the
No,
clarity.
thank you.
Terry, I
Thank
see
you.
your hand still up. Is that perpetual or you just forget to put it down?
I can't help it. I have questions. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I understand that we're going to get, or the state is going to offer grants for the reading program. Will we be applying for that grant to support the new program?
I think Dr. Casimiro is jumping in.
Yeah, if I may. So I have reached out to the state about that because in all of the webinars and the meetings that we've gone to, we keep hearing about this. But there has been nothing tangible. We haven't seen an application yet. It's been a little bit elusive as to how to apply for it, who's eligible. As part of our strategy with making our decision this year, instead of requesting to delay, was A, we have ESSER funds available now, which we won't have down the road, but B, hoping for Danbury to be kind of first in line for any funding to kind of get a jump on anything, because those pots stretch pretty quickly. But I am actively trying to understand how to apply for it. I have reached out to our technical support provider, along with some of the commissioners, department heads, to get information. But there's very little right now. They are in a little bit of a twisted state. I hate to say it that way, but they're trying very hard to deal with the reading legislation mandate themselves, as they too did not quite have the same level of manpower that's needed to kind of support districts in the moment. But I'm anticipating that will come eventually. Things have been coming very slowly, but we're on top of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions? 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 Closing statement, sir.
Well,
Additional statements, maybe not closing.
well, one, Mr. Russo, I just want to acknowledge the sign behind me, AIS. I am at AIS this evening, and I've been invited over to read to kids this evening. So that's why I wore my favorite tie. So I'm excited.
Okay. Absolutely.
But thank you, and I appreciate your patience with us as we were trying to get this information and this update. I feel a little bit better about where we are. I feel a lot better about where we are right now in terms of the story. It was important to us to make sure the story was kind of folded in with the line items, so it's just kind of one big story, if you will. And I'm looking forward to the day, hopefully soon. I know we will be at City Hall and speaking to the Education Committee. And I think it's really our opportunity to just reiterate the needs. And Louisa, I appreciate the question Louisa was asking, because I anticipate we'll get a similar question from the council that evening. Well, what if you don't get this much? What does that mean? And I think we need to be prepared with that answer for you. And then also for the city of Danbury. So we will be working on those answers for you over the next couple of months leading up to April and May when these decisions are made.
Thank you, sir.
No, thank you, Mr. Russo.
John, Eddie, comments?
Good, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, any closing remarks, Mr. Walson, or shall we adjourn?
I'm fine, Mr. Russo. Thank you. I really appreciate everyone making time for us tonight and accepting the invitation to meet one more time before the board meeting tomorrow. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Could
Thank
I
you.
just say, I think the presentation tonight, going forward, if it goes down to City Hall, is a great presentation, very clear. And that's because most of us have sit through this at least 3 times and more and really understand it. And I think you're much more clear. The only thing that really we need to sort of think about and focus on when all those ESSER funds and we get to that cliff and how that's going to really affect us in the next 2 years. We're going down, we're asking for 100 million. Okay, our budget request is 9 million. We don't know how close the city is going to bring us to that. But I think whatever we ask is just enough to barely keep our doors open. And I think once the citizens of Danbury really understand it, and really, I don't think anyone, unless their specialty is to do budget, really understand what that really means. And we can talk about all the things, and Mr. Donovan did a beautiful explanation of what he needs to get kids through the high school. And I think if we keep working together and hope that the city can look at what we need and maybe work with us a little bit more and give us a little bit additional funding. And I don't expect that will happen, but it doesn't hurt us to ask. But I'm very pleased with the presentation, and I just hope everything goes well. Do you know the exact date that you're meeting with the Education Committee of the city?
We don't have a date yet. I know John and Citywide PTO last night just went through the month. John, what month was that again? April?
I think it's last week of April.
Okay.
Likely.
Oh, okay.
Well, we
Thank
don't
you.
have an exact date yet, Ms. Cooper.
Okay. Thank
Anyone?
you.
Thank you. And thanks again, Mr. Russo, for tonight. Looking forward to seeing everyone tomorrow.
Thank
Okay.
you all. Tara, all right, wish you all good evening. And let's adjourn. It's 5:51 p.m. Terry, I see your hand up there. Go
I
ahead.
motion to adjourn.
Oh, I second that. Okay. Thank you all for participating. Sir, Mr. Walson, thank you very much for again, another closer look. And again, it's a little bit different than we've had before.
Yes.
But we know where we are, we know what we need, and I appreciate you all your cabinet and your chiefs of schools, John. Okay. To all, I wish